there is so much to unpick from that. Standing with a big lectern saying stop the boats when you've just spectacularly failed to stop the boats is interesting in itself. But joining me to discuss all of this is immigration lawyer Dr S Chelvan and former UKIP leader Henry Bolton. Welcome to you both. Chelvan, let's just start on that point. It was the other interesting thing. I won't allow a foreign court. Well, it wasn't a foreign court.
No, it was a British court.
I know he's talking about Strasbourg ultimately.
But it wasn't a foreign court which is, ruled the policy unlawful. It was a British court with British judges applying British law. And that's what they wanted after Brexit. They take back control. So this is a wonderful case where we see the Constitution working brilliantly, where we have checks and balances against an executive, a government which is out of control, who's spent £140 million of taxpayers' money on a policy which will leave a real risk, and this is a substantial grounds, a real risk that if we send refugees to Rwanda to have their claims determined, there's a real risk that be returned back to countries such as Afghanistan, Syria and Yemen, being refused asylum and be returned back to countries where they'll have a serious risk of harm. So that's why I didn't understand the Prime Minister's statement. It's got nothing to do with the Strasbourg court.
It was incredibly muddled. And Henry, like with Chelvan, we've spoken about this many times. Yeah. It should never have got to a Rwanda policy, right? I mean, the policy was always doomed to failure. Anyone with a brain knew that.
It was always doomed to failure. I mean, I've been felt myself a little bit of a lone voice. On one hand, I believe that we need to really rein back on immigration, including the small boats. But then people sort of question why I've said that Rwanda is not really workable. It's too expensive, operationally extremely difficult, and is now being proved to be legally very much flawed. And, one of the problems here, yes, it's a British court applying British law, and looking at the contextual sort of element, which is the UN Convention on Refugees, and so on, a range of different conventions that we're part of, the torture and so on, Convention Against Torture. But ultimately, this is British courts making a decision based on British law. If the government has a problem with that, it goes back to the fact that the law has been poorly drafted in terms of enabling the government to implement the policies that it wants to do. And I've said that right from the beginning. We need to have a very different approach to the way that we draft law relating to our borders, immigration, and indeed anything that happens.
Well, look, I think the first issue Henry has is it's not an issue of immigration, it's an issue of refugees. People come to this country seeking sanctuary. And Ian, you know I have had these conversations before. You have the YouGov poll from last night, which says that only 30% of the British public understand the Rwanda policy is they get sent to Rwanda and they have the asylum claims determined there. 30%, just like you when we started this conversation, thought that they're sent to Rwanda and then if their asylum claims are granted, they're sent back to the UK. So the government can't... So the British public itself accept that if there are people who are genuine refugees, the UK will be ultimately responsible.
Gotcha.
So the issue is that when they say the British public are, it's not a manifesto promise. It was never in the 2019 manifesto. That was absolutely, but very important. It's not badly framed law. It's the politicians who don't understand the law.
Well, it's
That's
both.
The problem.
It's both. And you can't expect a politician who doesn't understand the situation, and I would say the Prime Minister doesn't, even the Prime Minister doesn't, to be able to draft and enact law that's appropriate to doing what they want to do.
But we can't enact law. We cannot enact law which sends individuals back to countries where there's a real risk of being sent back to suffer torture.
I'm not arguing that we should. In fact, my argument is that actually, even if Rwanda were to work, in terms of it was all legally sort of fine and dandy, but no, just hear me out. Then you would still have the problem that people would still be coming to the UK if, as the government's ambition would be...
And the numbers are tiny compared to the rest of Europe. And we know that the majority of people who come to the UK,
they're tiny related to the UK as well,
are genuine refugees.
500 people going to Rwanda per year...
At 140 million pounds.
Right, and I've said
this. We're in a cost of living crisis.
Let me finish. Right, that is not going to stop the problem that the British public perceive to be out there, which is the small boats, which is the high rate of immigration
and they're risking their lives to come to get sanctuary. And what we need to do is open safe and legal routes. We need to open processing centres
because we could talk specifically about Rwanda for a lot longer. Let's move forward then. How do we stop the boats then?
Well, look, the situation is...
Because you're talking a lot about refugees and vulnerable people.
Well, yeah,
Many people
you know,
say,
the Home Office...
as you know, many people say, actually, these are, not even as a pejorative, economic migrants, want a better life, nothing wrong with that, but they shouldn't be here.
No, and that's... I'm trying to be as mild as I possibly can. That's an inaccurate statement of the facts. We know that the majority...
There we disagree, very much so.
The fact is that Refugee Legal Council did an analysis of those who were going across the boats and found that 95% in those brackets would be granted asylum.
But
we know that Rishi
granted
Sunak,
asylum doesn't mean
they are genuine.
You're
Absolutely.
assuming the asylum system is resilient and interrogates the situation.
Well, as somebody who's worked in the field for over nearly 25 years, day in, day out,
operationally on the ground.
You're not determining refugee claims.
No, but I have been out on the ground fighting the organised crime and actually dealing with and often taking people out of the people smuggling networks. I know these people.
Henry, I totally agree. Henry, I totally agree, and we don't need to swap CVs here. Henry, I totally agree that we should stop criminal gangs profiteering from refugees, and the only reason why they profit from these vulnerable people is that we don't provide safe and legal routes to claim asylum. There's no asylum visa. So the only reason why they have to pay these criminal gangs to come over from France to the UK is that we do not allow them to come to the UK legally to claim asylum. That is the full stop.
Because look at now the government has...
That's a fact.
What I'm going to talk about, the government has addressed, but it's nonetheless a good example of why what you say is not correct.
No, but you accept that if they were given a legal route from France to the UK to claim asylum, they would not have to go into the boats.
12,000 Albanians last year came across the Channel. Right?
And 52% of Albanians. I work with Albanians who are trafficked, victims of modern slavery.
Finish my point?
I mean, the majority... You know,
do you do this in court?
I think my opponent...
I'm sure he does.
Probably.
Let Henry just respond to all of this.
So the 12,000 Albanians came across. All right, Albanians can get into the European Union without a visa for 3 months. The reason they don't come here on a visa, which they could apply for online, the reason they don't come here is because they wouldn't be granted a visa. So what do? They get on a small boat and they cross the Channel. And they're paying the people smugglers to do it.
Shelvan, that is a fact, isn't it? What Henry's just said is true.
The large number of, the majority of Albanians, if you look at the Home Office statistics, 52% are granted refugee status or some sort of humanitarian protection. Because they're not in the EU.
Have you been to Albania?
I've been working on Albanian cases.
I was advisor to the Albanian Prime Minister.
Well, wonderful. So why don't you advise him to stop the criminal gangs in Albania who traffic women, who make them victims of modern slavery?
We're not talking about women.
And we're talking about men as well.
The vast majority of
men and boys are trafficked. They put
Chelvan, this is a terrible situation, but it is not. We are not responsible for all bad things in other countries.
Correct.
Many people would look at that and go, hang on, how is that our problem? With respect and being as kind as we can.
Our problem, and we need to shift it from Albania because that is the bête noire of the whole situation. We look at the statistics. The majority of people come from conflict. No, we come from conflict-ridden places like Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, Eritrea, Sudan. If you look at the top 5 countries which the government have committed to fast-tracking through a system. In February, they announced this sort of system for asylum claim questionnaires where the legacy, we know there's 175,000 decisions which need to be made in these asylum claims. Yep. Some of my clients have had to wait up to 3 years. Yes, but that is because the Home Office is not broke. And what we need to do is be able to put the money, all the money we've wasted on Rwanda, £140 million, not even the cost of the legal litigation, could have been spent in ensuring that those claims were decided. As your caller said, if they can support themselves, well, if you gave them asylum, the right to work, then they would.
Everybody agrees, Henry, there's a lot of wasted money.
There's a lot of wasted money. There's a lot of wasted effort.
Cost of living crisis.
There's a failure of planning. There's a failure of policy development, and there's a failure in the drafting of legislation. What this country needs, and it needs to be done with full consultation with all parties in this, the legal profession, the courts.
Yes, but our teetotaling Prime Minister is drinking at the last chance saloon.
That's a different...
Because he's got an election.
I don't care
at the end of last
I don't care
year.
who the government is or the Prime Minister.
It's not going to
We've got massive problems on our borders. We've got immigration that we seem incapable of controlling and managing properly. We've got cocaine and heroin coming across the borders. 97% of the illegal...
But that's different from refugees. That's different from the 70 to 80% of those who come across our borders to get
You're going
asylum.
contrary to all international best practice if you say, deal with your borders one issue at a time. Your borders, it's like saying a police force should have different patrols to do with road traffic collisions, drunk drive or violence, burglary. You have one agency dealing with it. Quite rightly, you can't separate it out. You deal with the risks out there with the appropriate resources.
We are short of time
and legislation. We haven't got any of that.
In 15 seconds, succinct question. It's the one we're putting to our viewers and listeners today. How would you stop the boats?
By creating safe and legal routes for initial processing centres in France, and allow individuals, as we've done up to June 2022, to arrive in the UK and claim asylum and not put them in a status of being illegal migrants.
Henry Bolton, same question. How do you stop the boats?
Very broad brush. I would have put together a fully integrated, comprehensive, cross-governmental strategy run from the highest possible level, including legislation. Pull it all together, come up with a comprehensive plan and set of objectives. On the channel itself, get landing craft. We've done it with the military. Ramps down, foul the outboard engine, ramp down, drive the thing just scoop it up into the front and return it to France.
There it is.
Won't happen.
It won't happen, but it should.
The disagreement could carry on for many days here in the studio. Thank you, Chelvan. Good to see you. Thank you, Henry. Good to see you as well.